A Conversation with John Conenna is sponsored in part by Venus Travel Incorporated in Chicago, the agency that has served the Chicagoland area for over 55 years, which is still owned and operated since 1968 by the Conenna family. Again, Venus Travel, the premier agency for over 55 years, is a proud sponsor of A Conversation with John Conenna. And now, on to our episode. Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of A Conversation with John Conenna. Today, we are thrilled to have on Melinda Lysiak, wife of Tom Lysiak, who for me was a very, very exciting player. And when he came to Chicago, of course, formerly of the Atlanta Flames and the Chicago Blackhawks, he was something when they made their trade in 1979 that we'll get to. It was exciting for me because now Chicago will have a bona fide star center after the aging Stan Mikita was going to retire. But at the moment, let's talk to Melinda Lysiak. Melinda, how are things going these days? And truly a thrill to have you on.
I'm thrilled to be here. Good to see you, John. Things are going great. Just living here on the farm Tommy and I had, and just maintaining the farm and getting ready to go to Germany to see my daughter.
Yeah, great. No, and we'll talk about that too.
Okay, good.
Son-in-law has played professional hockey also for many years. Now, Melinda, where do you meet Tom Lysiak?
I'm an Atlanta girl, and I had a farm I had a roommate or two, and both of my roommates were dating friends of Tommy's. And one was a hockey player, a guy named Barry Dean from Saskatchewan. And he played, I think, for the Flyers. And he was dating one of my roommates, and he kept talking about Tommy. So it was a blind date. And I've got to interject here. My mom and dad met on a blind date. Tommy and I met on a blind date, and my daughter and her son met on a blind date.
So it runs in the family.
Yeah.
So you met him basically. So yeah, because I was going to ask you, because I know Tom was born in High Prairie, Alberta.
Right.
And I don't know much about you, so I figured, were you from High Prairie, Alberta? And little cold over there.
Cold. I'm an Atlanta girl. I like the South, like the South weather.
Did you meet him during that rookie season in Atlanta in '73?
No, I didn't know him in Atlanta at all. Not at all. I met him when he was playing for the Blackhawks. I met him in 1980.
Oh, wow.
And excuse me, I met him in 1981. We married in 82. So we only knew each other 10 months when we got married. So we met in 81 in the summer, in between games, in between seasons. And then he asked me to marry him, and we got married during the All-Star break. He wasn't in the All-Star at that time. And so we were then in Chicago.
And here, me thinking, because this is stuff that you can't find if you, unless I knew somebody from the family or something like that. I really thought, because when you said the Georgia girl, that, maybe when he came up at 73, you were in the stands and some fantastic romance would have started with those Atlanta Flames.
I'd only been to one game in my life, and I knew nothing about hockey when I met Tommy. So we had fallen in love before I'd really gone to a game and watched him.
So basically, I mean, so when he came to Georgia for a game that you guys met, meaning, or how did he?
Oh no, he always lived here in the summer. He loved Georgia, and so every summer, as soon as the season ended, he lived here. Like most of the Flames, it's strange. All the Canadian boys, they all still live here. I still see all the guys.
Wow.
Yeah, they love Atlanta, and Tommy loved here, and he had a hunting cabin here. He loved to hunt in the summer, so I met him on summer.
Yeah, for sure. His legacy really begins with this thing that I saw also that made me want to reach out to you with the Medicine Hat Tigers. He was honored, I think, in there, and I think I have here 2017, where you went back there for a ceremony where they retired. At that time, he was wearing the famous number 9.
That's right. Yeah.
And they retired him at the Medicine Hat Tigers, which was part of this WHL league before the Atlanta Flames draft him as the #2 pick in '73 behind Dennis Botman. And that's where his but the legacy, I think, started. And the funny part that you bring up is that he was actually going to be a Montreal Canadian.
Not in his mind.
I know.
He was never going to be with Montreal. He wanted to come to Georgia. He did not want a Canadian team. I don't know why, but he let the word be out that he was not, if Montreal tried to get him, he would not come.
Yeah, and I got to be honest, I remember that because I was about 13, 14 years old at that time. And that summer before with that draft, they were saying that Lysiak's going to go to the Canadians because that reminded them of a great player that they had, Jean Beliveau. That Lysiak had the skills, the similarities to Beliveau, but yeah, he wanted to play with those Atlanta Flames,
Right.
for sure. Does he talk about those early years with you in Atlanta? Because I know you didn't see him play in Atlanta then. Does he talk about those early years with Atlanta? Because those were great years for him.
Those are great years. Mainly, I just, everybody knew about him here in town. He was a big name. Back then, he did talk about it a little. He loved Atlanta. He loved the Flames. And he's still, I'm still in touch with Timmy Ecclestone and Eric Vale and Willie Flett. Yeah, they're all still around. I still meet up with the guys and they love him. So.
Oh, yeah. And, I'm going to get to this point of him. There was a guy by the name, a defenseman in Toronto that loved Tommy. They used to go hunting. I think it was, forget his name. He just passed away a couple of years ago and they would go hunting. I forget Kurt Walker.
Oh yeah. Kurt lived down the street from us. And funny story about Kurt. Tommy didn't talk about hockey. When Tommy got out of hockey, he just didn't talk about it. It was just done. And then Kurt moved down the street from us and would come over, and Tommy always had a shop and had the boys come for drinks and every night. And Kurt came over all the time and they'd talk hockey. And Kurt would make him talk about hockey. And I got to hear stories I've never heard before that I love. I love stories. Tommy loves stories, but they'd sit out there and tell stories, hockey stories all the time. And then Tommy got back into thinking hockey after all those years. And then, of course, later when my daughter suddenly finds a hockey player she wants to marry, he really got into it again.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you, you're beating me to the punch on my questions. I was going to ask you, after hockey, I know, he didn't really stay that much involved after his career, right? He
did not. I think he'd played hockey his entire life. Since a little boy. And he'd always missed that hunting and fishing and golfing. And he couldn't wait to do that. A lot of guys have a hard time with this transition when they come out of hockey. Tommy had no problems with the transition at all. He was so happy, and he would play golf and hunt and fish all the time.
Wow. Because like you said, since he was a little boy, but his Atlanta years, because, they were, he was such a consistent player. And at the time that Tom came into the league, Melinda, there were some great players that were picked earlier than him in these drafts. Like there was a player in Buffalo named Gilbert Perreault. There was a guy by the name of Dale Talon who became an announcer.
I love Dale.
Dale. He was actually taunted as a center, then I went and played defense. And then there were guys before him like Bobby Clark. So the Lysiaks, the Perreaults, the Talons were changing the game of the 70s. And of course, Atlanta being a upstart team, Tom got to play under a great Canadian player named Boom Boom Geoffrion.
He loved Boom Boom. Yeah, yes, he did.
Yes. And Geoffrion was not a, what do I want to say? He wasn't a tactical coach. He was more of a fan favorite like Tom was with the fans. And then does he ever talk about those days where there was that transition from Bernie Geoffrion to Fred Creighton, which I think starts the problem for Tom in Atlanta, correct?
Yes, he was not a big Fred Creighton fan. Yeah. and they had issues. And but I think Tommy was shocked when the trade happened. I don't think he saw it coming.
Right. Because that was my next thing to ask you about it, because I know knowing that you didn't know him till 81. In 79, he gets traded to Chicago.
Mhm.
which, I mean, for guys like me that were playing hockey on the amateur level and knew the style of player that he was, it was excitement because we had an older Stan Mikita now that we knew was on his last legs. Boldereb also was older than Tommy, but I mean, the Blackhawks gave up a lot, and the main guy in that trade was Tom, because there was a defenseman named Greg Fox, Pat Ribble, and I think Miles Zaharko at that time. Does he ever tell you, oh no, I'm going to this town called Chicago?
Um, I don't know if you remember this, but back when he was first traded, when he went there, they had a coffin that they unfurled, the big long coffin. They were so upset about losing Darcy Rhoda and Phil Russell and the other guy.
Ivan Boldereb.
Ivan Boldereb, I don't know, I couldn't think of it. But they were really upset about Tommy coming. And they were mad, but it did not take long at all that he was absolutely one of the best favors of the whole. I mean, they loved him on that team after a while.
Yeah, because to have him come in 79 and then the following year, we're going to get to this gentleman because he says something really nice about Tom. We draft pick a young uprising center named Dennis Savard. And Denny, and we're having Lysiak and Denny, having two top centers. It was something, at that time. But did he ever say it was something that he was shocked by the trade, though, in conversations with you?
Totally shocked. And he didn't want to leave Atlanta. So it was a little sad, but it didn't take him long. He got to love Chicago. If I were to pick any place else besides Georgia, I would pick Chicago. I love Chicago, and he did too. Just so much to do there, and such a great town, and such a good hockey town.
Melinda, did you guys live in a certain suburb of Chicago during the season?
Mainly Elmhurst. We lived in Lombard for a little while. We lived in several different places, but Elmhurst was our main spot.
And Elmhurst, which is about 2 miles from where I live in a town called Elk Grove Village.
Oh,
yeah. And it's a cutesy kind of town with restaurants and different things to do, and just a nice upscale community. So was it hard? Now we'll go back to you. Was it hard for you to, you're this Georgia girl. Now you're going to come and see some nice 30 below zero weather. No.
Well, I was a flight attendant for Delta for over 30 years. So I was in and out of Chicago. I'd already loved Chicago. So when we moved up there, I mean, I was all for it. I loved it. And we were right down the street from Tony Esposito. So Marilyn was one of my best friends. So I loved hanging with Marilyn. And it was such a good group of people. I mean, it was Doug Wilson and his wife, Kathy, was one of my good friends. And then Denny was great. And Mona. And there was just a lot of good people. Daryl Sutter and Wanda Sutter. Daryl was his best friend on the team.
Yes, I saw that Daryl, and correct me if I'm wrong, was the best man at your wedding.
He was, and his wife was the maid of honor.
Yeah, wow, that was something. So he comes to Chicago, and now things are really starting to flow. He comes to a team now that is starting to turn the corner. They had guys like Tom, they had guys like Terry Ruskowski at the time, Rich Preston, Daryl Sutter now is coming into his own. Was he excited around that time when he met you? I mean, let alone did he met you, but was he excited as that player coming here to Chicago?
He loved Denny Savard. He thought Denny was the greatest. And he liked the guys. He got to make friends easily. He liked, and when he was single, he really enjoyed Chicago.
No, we won't go there.
Yeah. He was a wild boy. That was a bad boy, that Tommy.
Yeah. And he had that witty personality, because and I'll get to my story toward the end with him. But, because he was basically in Atlanta, the franchise, meaning he had been named captain even those last 2 years. So now it's this rude awakening, because he is the main star. And I was just looking at some stats of his, where of course the Atlanta Flames don't play anymore, but he will always be known to have been the leading scorer in points for the Atlanta Flames. There was a playoff run here a year after you two were married, 1982, against the Vancouver Canucks.
Yes.
It was an opening round game, and I'll never forget it. And at the time, I just really thought they were gelling. And I had no doubt in my mind that I thought they were going to beat the Canucks. Does he ever remember that series? Did he ever talk about that series? I mean, because there was a chance to go to the Stanley Cup after that series if they could have beat Vancouver.
Right. And, it's always a dream of everybody to have that ring and go to the Cup. So it was always a dream of his. He wanted, and I think he did think they'd make it, but nothing got Tommy down. He was up all the time. He always kept a good mood and a good attitude. So it didn't, he took it in stride.
Yeah, that series. He definitely brought so much credibility that, again, when you get a guy like a Tom Lysiak, you're going to get players who now are going to want to come to a team and, want to play for you. Did he talk about any early mentors in his life, like besides maybe somebody that was at Medicine Hat or a coach? Was there a coach or anybody that, that even after his retirement that once in a while would pop up or he would still talk to that said, wow, Melinda, this was a great early mentor?
Well, he loved the owner of the Medicine Hat Tigers, Rod Carey. And, but as far as a mentor, I don't remember him ever talking about a mentor. He played a lot with Lanny McDonald. That was his partner in all the Medicine Hat things. And, but he didn't talk about a mentor.
Yeah. In my opinion, he retired maybe a little bit on the earlier side of his career. I think it was 85, 86. Had the injuries caught up to him?
His back was hurting a lot. And he seemed to be, Tommy wanted to go out with his head up and he was feeling like it was getting, if it wasn't a cracked ankle from taking a puck or if it wasn't a bad back, he was missing games and he didn't like that. And his points were coming down because he was missing games. So I think he wanted to go out with his head up.
With his head up, right. And because I know he was, how old was he, Melinda, when he retired in that 85, 86 year?
33.
33, yeah. But again, you make the great point to start this interview. You're playing from when you were a little, a little guy. Probably started skating when he was 4 or 5 years old. You're in these leagues, and now you become this dominant player. You're at the top of your game, and everybody's looking for number one, especially if you're a first or second line center. Somebody's coming after you every night. I thought his Chicago years, let alone his Atlanta years, were fantastic and consistent, but his Chicago years brought a lot of credibility. Matter of fact, I have a story for you. I coached hockey here on the amateur level, and I got to coach Eddie Olczyk's son.
And I love Eddie.
Yeah, Eddie, great guy. And I'll never forget one of the first, he had asked me, hey, how far do you go back with the Blackhawks? So I go back to the days of Makita and Magnuson. And he said to me, oh, I got to tell you a Tom Lysiak story. I says, well, go ahead. And he told me that he wrote to Tom and Tom sent him a picture and Eddie told him, hey, one day I would love to skate with you. And they did. It's a goosebump feeling. Does he remember his days with Eddie?
Oh, he loved Eddie. Yeah, Eddie was great. And when Tommy died, it was in the middle of the playoffs. And it was the night before they had played. And it was my son-in-law was actually playing in it for the Sharks against Pittsburgh, maybe. And at the funeral, I look up and there's Eddie and there's Pat Foley. And they had just announced the game the night before in the middle of the Stanley Cup playoffs. So, and he couldn't stop crying. He loved Tommy. And he was a great guy. I love Eddie. And Eddie sent me his book.
Yes, the book. And of course, and the trials that he had gone through those last couple of years. And we miss him here now in Chicago because the Blackhawks did a shuffle here with the announcing and the whole team. In 1983, and don't want to sit on this subject too long, in 1983, allegedly he tripped a referee, Tommy, for being a bad boy. Not a big fan of the refs, but we won't go there. Was it something that he just, did he talk about it after his career? Did he talk about it during the incident? Where were you when you heard that this had happened to him? What goes through your mind as the wife?
What has he done now? I knew but he told the story. I know Tommy doesn't really get angry, but he can get ticked off if you just keep on doing something. He wants justice.
Justice,
He
right,
felt-
right.
He thought this referee was really doing wrong, doing him dirty, and he had warned him. He came up beside him, skated beside him, said, "Quit doing this," or whatever he was doing. And he continued, so he did flip him.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, husband to wife, of course, because you know, my wife, Tommy, husband to wife. I mean, it just was something that we all have a breaking point, correct?
Mhm, mhm.
So, I mean, he admits to a Melinda Lysiak, I did do it, right? Yeah.
He did it.
All right, Tom.
I knew he did it as soon as I heard it. I knew he did it, but yeah.
Yeah.
It's just, yeah, if you watch it, but if you also watch it, you'll see that if you watched it from the whole game, you'd see that ref did tease or whatever he does. He would intentionally try to get Tommy out. And it was one of those things. And that was the last, I think, of that ref's career after that season. So,
and I have to tell you, reading some research on it, there was this thing going on in the 80s that like referees were out to get the Chicago Blackhawks. And I think it was starting to, play on the team and the psyche of the team. Did he make a clear-cut decision in 85, 86 that, okay, listen, I saw that he had played in about 51 games that year. Did he make a clear-cut decision then after the season? Okay, this is it.
He did. He said that was it. And Bob Pulford called that summer and said, if you just show up here in training camp, this is never written anywhere, but he said, come on ahead, come. Won't you come back? And he said, no, this is it. He definitely knew that was the time.
Right.
When to stop. And he had 13 years, just like my son-in-law. They both had 13 years.
Yeah, Justin. And we're talking about Justin Braun, right? Correct?
Right.
Yeah, who married your beautiful daughter. Matter of fact, I got a chance to kind of creep in on that beautiful wedding, which is beautiful, just outside. Matter of fact, just watching it a couple of days ago, just outstanding. And to see him, be at that wedding, Tom, you guys look, your daughter, tremendous, just tremendous to see that.
That was in the middle of when he had the cancer. And his dream was he wanted to live long enough to walk her down the aisle. And he did. And he enjoyed that night and he felt fantastic. And he was doing really good then. So, yeah, and that was her thrill to have her dad there. And do that.
And I even saw him do a little dance with her.
Oh, yeah. Tommy danced to the end. He always danced.
Something, yeah. How was it after hockey for him? I noticed, was it landscaping of the farm and got into some real estate? How was he? How did he adapt life after being this superstar hockey player?
He just was as content as anything. He just loved living out in the country. He loves the country. He loves farms and he loves being on a bush hog. So he was really happy. He had no trouble with it at all. I mean, people didn't know who he was and that was fine with him.
Did he get calls from NHL teams, like maybe to say, hey, Tom, would you like to come back maybe and work with our forwards or be an assistant coach? Did he get those calls from time to time?
Not that much, because he let it be known he had no interest. He would not have gone back for anything. He really was so satisfied out in the country and very content and always happy. He was happy to the end. I mean, he was always happy.
Wow. Melinda, he did an interview here in the old Chicago Stadium. I don't know how long ago it was. It had to be the old Chicago Stadium with a guy by the name of Chet Kopek. It's an old YouTube. I found it. And Tom just had like those great one-liners or these snippets that he wouldn't, finish, but just they would talked about his career, and of course they talked. And Kopek asked him how it was to play with Tony Esposito, even though I think when Tom got to Chicago, Tony was at the tail end of his career. But, your husband was so gracious about every athlete and every person, that he played with. So you think he did. So I'm going to ask Melinda Lysiak the ultimate question of this podcast. Was he the better hockey player or the better farm guy?
Well, he was a great hockey player. I think he was a great hockey player, but character-wise, you can't beat somebody like Tommy. I've never met somebody before or after like him. He was so unselfish. He didn't have a greedy bone in his body. Money meant nothing to him. And he was just a giver. he would cook big giant. He was cook. Did you know he was an excellent chef?
No, I did not even know that.
Unbelievable chef. We had fabulous meals every single night. We'd have the duck and we'd have lamb and we'd have escargot. But he would fix extra and he'd just give it to neighbors. He was very, very generous and always helping everybody.
During this time when you guys, of course, this farm is yours, is in Georgia, correct?
Right.
Yeah. So you were said a couple of minutes back just now, people really didn't realize that, would he have to tell people that he had this hockey career?
Oh, he never told anybody. That's not his thing.
That's not his thing.
Not his thing, but word gets out, and everybody got to know, and lots of people hung out in his little shop.
Yeah, and to see nowadays the way we have this, how we are living our lives, meaning you could find everything on a YouTube or a Google to bring them. I have to tell you, I met him for the worst 30 minutes of my life in 1980. I'll tell you why I made him. I was a goaltender at a college here called Loyola University, and the coach at the time was Jerry Pfeiffer. And like I says, I can remember it was him and Glenn Sharpley. And we saw these two Blackhawks working out in the morning on this place called the UIC Pavilion. So this coach, who really didn't care for me as a goaltender, because I was basically the backup, said to me, he yells out my name, Conenna, get down here. So he goes, Lysiak is going to shoot some pucks on you. And I'm like, oh my God, Lysiak, here's a professional. Well, anyway, so nice. He says, hi, he says, I'm Tom Lysiak. Oh, I go, I know who you are, while I was shaking. Well, he shot a couple pucks at me. Well, this arrogant Italian man says to a friend of mine that was off to the side when they were shooting pucks, I go, you know what? I go, Lysiak's not that. He's okay. Well, Lysiak, Tommy heard me. The next 25 minutes, Melinda,
was hell.
That puck was coming in like an aspirin tablet. I couldn't pick it. He was picking quarters, like putting a needle through a thread, the thread through the needle. And but
that was hysterical.
And then afterward, he put his arm around me. He goes, I had to tell you, I heard what you said. And because I just had to prove my point. I go, you proved it, but just,
I like
just
good story.
So, gracious, what, you could tell his personality of, just unbelievable. But like I said, he set records everywhere we went. I know this is a stretch coming from a guy who, played hockey at the amateur level, but I thought Tom was really an unselfish player. I thought he could have had more goals, because he made a lot of guys that were mediocre famous just by his assists alone. I think he winds up with, God, I want to say 551 assists. And
yes,
you know what? I think if he plays 2 or 3 more years, these are Hall of Fame numbers. These are Hall of Fame numbers. And I know nowadays the Hall of Fame is kind of watered down, in my opinion, but a guy like Tom Lysiak should be there just as much as I think as some of the people that are in there right now. So I
agree.
Yeah, I mean, again, just when you see that you got 551 assists and over 300 goals, and he performed so well during the regular season and in playoffs that it was just amazing. Is there one game or moment that he talks about that he brought up to you just as the husband to the wife?
Like a favorite game?
Yeah.
He did have. He had one really good game. I cannot remember the stats on. I'm sorry.
No. Yeah, I'm glad you told me how it all was. Yeah.
Yeah, he had some really good games, and I think some of his times back that were really amazing, even for the NHL, was when he was in the junior. He would get 10 points in a night in junior, a lot. I mean, it was like he was really he would get 100 and I don't remember how many points a year, a season in junior hockey. So
his numbers at Medicine Hat, where they retired his number. That was how was that? Just to elaborate, how was that ceremony for you and Jessica?
Unbelievable to go out there. We didn't really know what to expect. And we were there with family and friends. Speaking of which, family and friends, the McCars were there. You know who Cale McCar is?
Yes, yes, yes.
That's cousin.
Oh,
So-
the cousin. Oh, that's his cousin. Okay.
Yeah. So my daughter and I went out on the ice, and the main player skated up and took off his jersey, which was number 9, and handed it to me. And it was lovely. It was very emotional, and had his mom there, and it was really good to see him. And he was on every telecam, every place, and it was fun to watch.
I mean, his numbers there were, and they still talk about him, was like, matter of fact, I have a quote from at that time. I don't know if he's still the Tigers president, but at that time it was Daryl Mazer. Was the Tigers president. He says in a statement, Lysiak is definitely considered to be by many people the greatest medicine tiger of all time. And this is some, and I think the year before he got drafted, Melinda, they won the championship in that year in 72, 73 before he came to the NHL.
Right. Yeah. It was quite a beginning to even start that strong and then come on into the league.
You know, I want to read you something before I let you go, because I know your time is valuable, and I could sit here talk all day about Tommy Lysiak, because for me, he was, you know, I tell people all the time, if I'm going to pick 5 top centers in Chicago to this day, till this day, 2023, it's definitely Makita. It's definitely Savard. It's definitely Jonathan Toews, Jeremy Roenick, and Tom Lysiak.
Yay!
are my top 5 centers. And don't argue with me about hockey, because even though I didn't play it professionally, I know it. But I want to leave you with a great comment from Dennis Savard. Okay. And Denny writes, you go through your life in the game, and there are special teammates, Savard said. Tommy was one of them. Tommy was a complete player who could do anything. But he was such a great guy off the ice, always laughing, always loose, and he always made sure the guys were together. That was Tom Lysiak. Melinda Lysiak, when you said yes to me on that, when I reached out to you, I was like, I don't believe I'm going to talk about Tom, because Tom meant the world to me. I still see that blonde hair, the number 12 jersey, when he'd come out at the Chicago Stadium, it was goosebumps.
Yeah. Oh, John, just thank you so much for having me on, and I love talking about Tommy. So.
Oh yeah, and you know what? And sometimes and I get it. Like, a lot of people ask me about this podcast, and they'll say, "Hey, you know what? Do you get a lot of people that say no to you?" Oh, I go, "Of course." So, but if you could see how I talked to my son about Tom Lysiak and what it meant and what he meant to me, and when he came to Chicago, this meant the world to me. And I can't wait to get this out on social media so people can see our interview.
John, thank you for honoring Tommy. I really appreciate that so much.
Thank you so much. Any closing remarks about Tommy in your eyes?
He was just the best. You know, it was a privilege for anybody that ever got to know him. They all agreed that he was just a wonderful guy. He was just great, and missed, very, very missed.
Very missed. Very missed.
Yeah.
Good night, everyone, and thank you. And we'll get this out to you shortly.
Bye, John.